Hey everyone, it's Tracy Martirana here from Holistic Wellness with Tracy. It is summer and I'm hoping that means lots of sunshine in our future. So today I am making a homemade sunscreen and an after sun aloe gel. I'm going to start with my after sun aloe gel. And to do that, I had to start by making an herbal oil. So in my jar, I have calendula, chamomile, lavender, and lemon balm, equal parts of all of them. And I chose these herbs because they are very soothing to burnt or irritated skin. And then I'm just covering the herbs with oil. Now I'm using a combination of sunflower oil and almond oil because that's what I had on hand. But grapeseed oil would be really nice here, or really just any oil that you have. And then I'm using my pan of water to create sort of a double boiler, just to warm the oil without getting it too hot. I kept it warm for a couple hours and then just sealed the jar, let it sit in my counter for about a week, just long enough to allow time for the herbal goodness to sort of meld into the oil. And now I'm going to start mixing ingredients. I'm starting with about a half a cup of aloe. I think that's about what was left in this bottle. Maybe it was a little bit short, maybe a little bit over. I'm not really sure. I didn't really measure. It just looked about a half a cup. Then I'm adding a quarter cup of witch hazel that I'm actually going to dump into my aloe bottle just so I can rinse out whatever bit of aloe was left that I couldn't get out by squeezing the bottle. And this is a good time to mention that the store-bought aloe after sun gels that are usually like this weird, bright, vibrant green also usually contain alcohol instead of the witch hazel. And alcohol really, while it feels good on a burn, it is much too drying. Witch hazel is a much better option. And then I'm going to add my herbal oil. So now you can just see by looking at it, the oil is sort of, it's darkened. It's almost got a little green hue to it because it's absorbed all that goodness from the herbs. I am going to strain it right into my measuring cup. I'm using about quarter of a cup. Now this is going to end up containing a few little tidbits, most likely from the chamomile, that just has little itty bitty pieces that don't get strained out in this metal strainer. So if that's going to bother you, you could just use a little bit of cheesecloth inside your strainer, but it doesn't bother me. I'm okay with that. And then because there's a bunch of oil still clinging to the herbs, I'm going to use a spoon to just press it out. That oil right there is probably like the best oil in the jar. See, it's because it's been like hugging those herbs. It's the best way I can describe it. But now the herbs are pretty much spent. You can toss them, you can compost them, do whatever you choose. And then the last thing I'm going to add is vitamin E oil. This is always a good addition to anything that you're making for skincare. But if you don't have it, that's okay too. If you have it, use it. If you don't let that stop you from making your herbal products. And now I'm just going to blend it together sort of vigorously. I'm using a spoon. You could use a whisk or a fork. You just want to blend it until it seems like it's very well blended. It's almost the consistency of like a thin applesauce. And then I'm going to transfer it to a squeeze bottle. Now you could use any squeeze bottle you want. I happen to have this one that I just emptied out, so I feel like I might as well repurpose it to hold my after sun gel. I have my funnel and working it through. Again, because it's the consistency of applesauce, it doesn't just pour right through. You do have to zhuzh it around a little bit, but that's okay. It does eventually go through. You might try like a rubber spatula or a chopstick if you need to, just to really get it to move a little faster, but eventually it gets there. And then you can store this at room temperature, or what's even nicer is to store it in the fridge. So then when you have that little bit of sunburn and you want to put some of this on, it's nice and cool. So not only do you have the wonderful effects of the aloe and the herbal oil, you also have that cooling, really actually temperature cooling from the refrigerator. And there it is. the After Sun Aloe Gel is ready to use. Next, we're going to move on to the sunscreen, which does have a little bit larger of an ingredients list, but all of these ingredients are important because they all contain some amount of SPF. The big one here is the zinc oxide, but that red raspberry oil is also high in SPF, and the shea butter and the coconut oil that we're going to use also contain a certain amount of SPF. So I have a pan with some water. Again, I'm creating a double boiler to help me melt everything gently without bringing it to a boil. I'm going to start with these little beeswax pellets. The beeswax just helps really thicken this so that it's a nice thick cream for your skin versus like a very watery concoction. If you don't have the pellets, if you just have a big block of beeswax, you can just grate that up as well. You want about a 1/4 cup. And then I have this shea butter that I'm going to use. I'm using about a 1/4 cup of that as well. And I encourage you to go visit my blog post on this. I'm going to link it down in the description box. In the blog post, I do go a little bit more in depth on the different types of sunscreen, chemical versus mineral. The chemical sunscreens, most of the chemicals they use are not the best, and that's what gives people sort of the EBGBs about using sunscreen sometimes. But the mineral ones, the minerals that they use, and the most common one is zinc oxide, are very safe. So if you're going to use sunscreen, and I highly recommend you do use sunscreen, mineral sunscreen is your best option. I'm putting the beeswax and the shea butter into the double boiler to get that started to melt, just because that is going to take the longest. I'm measuring out my coconut oil here. Coconut oil melts at a very low temperature, so this will be long melted way before the beeswax and the shea butter are. And then once I get the coconut oil into my beeswax and shea butter mixture, I'm just gonna sort of stir it around a little bit, trying to encourage it to melt. You'll notice as you do this that it is a little bit slow. At some point you might think, I don't know if this beeswax is ever actually going to melt, but it does, I promise you. You just have to be patient. Keep stirring it around over that gentle low heat, and it will eventually all melt together. And then once it's all melted, you can remove that from the double burner and then begin to add the last couple ingredients. That is the red raspberry oil. Again, this one is important. You can use red raspberry oil, or I believe carrot oil was also listed in this recipe as being a good oil with like a high SPF. Red raspberry oil, when I went to purchase my ingredients, I did find that red raspberry oil seemed to be much more cost effective, so that's the way I went. And then again, I have the vitamin E oil, so I'm going to add about 10 drops of that just for good measure. You could also use, if you have the little vitamin E capsules, you can always just pop a hole in that and squeeze a little vitamin E oil out of that. And then the main ingredient is this non-nano zinc oxide powder. The non-nano means it won't actually penetrate the skin, so that is why this is such a healthy option versus some of the chemicals in the chemical sunscreens, because you put it on, it doesn't absorb into the skin, it stays on top as a barrier that between you and the sun. The one thing to note is, while it doesn't absorb through the skin, so that makes it very safe, you do not want to inhale it. So while you're measuring out this powder, it's important to be very careful. Move slow and gentle to try not to create dust that you're going to inhale. And you might even want to consider using a mask. And then I'm going to slowly sort of mix it in. But once it's all into the liquid, Now it can no longer become airborne, right? Now I can whisk it vigorously, and as I whisk it, it begins to cool down and it begins to thicken. That does take a little while, so to speed it up, I'm taking my pan that I was using for my double boiler, I dumped out my hot water, I put in some cold water, and now I have it resting in this cool water bath while I whisk it, just to help cool it down a little bit faster, which helps it thicken a little bit faster. Because my oil was a little bit warm, it warmed up my water bath pretty fast, so I did at one point switch out, get some more cold water, put it back in, kept whisking. And you whisk until it gets to be a nice, thick, creamy texture. You don't want it overly watery. You want it nice and thick. Once you've reached the desired consistency, it's time to transfer it to some containers. I'm using these little glass containers that I have, but you could pretty much use anything that you have handy. It would have been easier to use more of a wide mouth container, only because this is pretty thick and viscous, and scraping it into those little containers, it was a little bit messy. And it would have been easier if the containers were wider, but I made it work. I also probably could have put this all in just one container, but I wanted two because I want to leave some of this here at home to use, and I want to take some of it down to our cabin to have on hand this summer. And then just to note, because of the beeswax and the shea butter and the coconut, this product is a little bit oily. In a way that's nice because it does feel very hydrating on your skin, but it does make cleanup a little bit messy. And this is definitely the time when you want to pull out the Dawn dish soap to really get that greasy mess sort of cleaned up. My nice natural soap that I have over in my pretty little flowered dispenser is not going to cut it here. I need something that's going to be a little tougher on the grease. But that being said, while it is a little greasy, it does still feel really nice on the skin. And while zinc oxide can sometimes leave like a white residue behind, this seemed to rub right in very nicely, disappear on my skin. It was hydrating without being too greasy. It still felt nice. And then lastly, I'm just going to pop a label on it just in case, sometimes things get pushed to the back of the medicine cabinet and we forget what they are within a week. We being me. So here are the final products: Sunscreen and After Sun Aloe Gel. I hope you will give these a try, and I hope you will pop around my channel, check out some of these other videos. I'm sure you will find something you enjoy. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.